Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a terrific guest. This is a very talented and accomplished, successful businessman who recently took over our only locally owned newspaper, not just here in Ponchatoula, but in the entire parish. So, as you may know, the Ponchatoula Times is now the Tangi Times, and we have with us their publisher, Bobby Perez. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Parker. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. Why don't we kick things off with you telling our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I am from the South Shore originally. Well, really originally, I was born in Texas on an Army base when my dad was in the Army, but moved to the New Orleans area when I was about 1. So I guess you could say I'm from there. And moved here to Ponchatoula in 10 and a half years ago in mid-2013. It's just a fabulous place to live. I couldn't be happier anywhere else. Would never take the South Shore back. Now, I was the eldest of 8 over there. Big family, a lot of deep roots. So I still go there occasionally to visit my family, but this is my home.
Well, I know you come from a great family because one of the lawyers that I work with, David Moragas, grew up down in River Ridge near you, was friends with your sister. In fact, saw her this weekend at one of his family's weddings. And he's spoken so highly of you since he's accepted a job here and started to spend time in Ponchatoula. Tell us what that one, let's talk family of that size. I'm number 2 of 4 boys, and that's got its own dynamic. I'm now raising a smaller family. I have only 2 boys. But what's it like being the eldest of 8 kids?
Annoying.
That's candid.
It was good. We had ours kind of packed together pretty tightly. I was 13 when the youngest one was born, so I wasn't even driving yet. And so my mom, God bless her, I don't even know how she's still alive, but she is. She's quite alive. She did everything for us. She was driving me to school in City Park and then somehow, managing a baby, and then, 6 others in between the two, everything. We had 5 boys and 3 girls. And so, you can imagine football, basketball, baseball, cheerleading, dance team. I mean, name it. She was all over the place. And
sounds like Superwoman.
Yeah, she is. Don't let her hear that. It'll go to her
head. That's really neat. The other thing I wanted to ask about, you grew up in River Ridge, which is obviously, from up here, we think of that as part of New Orleans. And I'm sure the River Ridge of then was not as busy as it is today. But, what's it like growing up in a great community like that can be quite close-knit and suburban, if you will, but it's so close to New Orleans. So, I mean, you really can hit like City Park, downtown, any of the New Orleans, destinations are a stone's throw away, but you're not stuck in the 7th Ward or, uptown or whatever. What was life like in River Ridge growing up as a little kid?
It was wonderful. River Ridge then is very similar to Ponchatoula now. We had huge lots. There were actually there was, my sister lives in the original log cabin on what was a farm when I was a teenager. It was they had horses, a pet alligator, which was pretty cool, and they it was, we used to ride our 3-wheelers around the street. That's when 3-wheelers were more of a thing than 4-wheelers. Our 4-wheelers had just come out. And that's what we used to ride to get back and forth to each other's houses, 3-wheelers.
I remember those 3-wheelers well, and they were dangerous. So I remember my brother flipping one and breaking his collarbone. If I was an injury lawyer back then, I probably would have gotten rich off of Yamaha or Suzuki or whoever was making those suckers. There's a reason we don't see them around anymore. They were quite dangerous.
They were dangerous.
That sounds a lot like probably growing up around here. What was the transition like coming up in a big house, clearly a close-knit family, lots of good old country fun, but very near the city. As you transition from the childhood chapter of your life to the adult chapter, what do you remember fondly from that period?
Well, it wasn't quite as smooth as just River Ridge to Ponchatoula. When I moved out of River Ridge, I lived in Old Metairie for a while. Now, throughout my childhood, though, I'll say that even though I lived in River Ridge, and you mentioned the proximity of River Ridge to New Orleans, I did everything in New Orleans. In fact, I went to school from 5th through 7th grade in the heart of City Park at Christian Brothers School. When I left Christian Brothers, I went to Jesuit, which is on Carrollton and Banks in Mid-City. I even went to college in New Orleans, Our Lady of Holy Cross College, which is now called the University of Holy Cross in Algiers. I spent the majority of my life in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like a good New Orleans Catholic boy. I'm hearing a lot of schools that friends of mine went to. Yeah.
What gave it away? The 8 kids?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But it seems to me New Orleans, I only went to school down there for 4 years at Tulane and then worked a little bit in federal court for a year or two. But I know I learned well in my short time there that people don't ask you where you went to college or this or that. The first question is, where'd you go to high school? And if it's Jesuit and their brother Martin, there's certain pecking orders and rivalries and whatnot. So it's always interesting to hear. And, frankly, we don't have a lot of Jesuit guys here in Ponchatoula. I know of at least one that commuted down there. Steve Pugh used to send one of his boys to Jesuit, but that's a real rarity around here.
Yeah, when I was at Jesuit, we didn't have anybody from Ponchatoula. We had a handful, maybe, from Slidell, and I always wondered how they made that commute. That just seemed like, might as well have been Lebanon.
Well, I know it's tough because my dad often speaks about his childhood commute from Ponchatoula to Covington to go to St. Paul's. Our family, like yours, was very Catholic. My grandmother insisted he stay in Catholic school. Back then, St. Joe ended early, and there was no St. Thomas Aquinas, here in Tangipahoa. So for 2 years, he begged, pleaded, and finally my grandmother relented and let him transfer to Ponchatoula High School. But he talks about that bus and how it was forever. And it's probably closer from here to Covington as the crow flies than Slidell to Mid-City. So, yeah, your classmates probably had it pretty tough. So you mentioned you went to Holy Cross. What came next after college? What did you do as a young man for your career?
I went into, my original collegiate intention. Well, not my original. That would have been a couple of chapters back. But when I was in my final stretch of college at Holy Cross College, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I went for biology. I finished, did quite well in the biology program. In fact, I finished that in 2.5 years. And then when I had rushed it so much that I didn't prepare for what was coming next, and that included 240 hours of service work with veterinarians, 120 small animal, 120 large animal, that you had to have finished before you even applied to that school. I learned that after I graduated from pre-med. And so
when it was kind of too late to make it up. I mean, that's
yes, absolutely. It just became it became something that wasn't going to happen. It was an impossibility at that point. So I went into industrial hygiene with a couple of friends of mine who were going to an MPH, Master of Public Health program at Tulane. And then working in industrial hygiene, I ended up in safety, industrial safety. And that became a really good field for me and a really good career. And that's where I went from that point. And I'm still in industrial safety. I'm still a safety consultant, have been now for a long time.
So from what I understand, you have kind of a variety of businesses. Surely the one that's going to pique everybody's interest around here is the Ponchatoula Times, now the Tangi Times, because it's an institution and we all use it. We love it. We read it. But tell me about that. You mentioned getting into safety. That career still goes on. How did you kind of come across the entrepreneurial itch, if you will? When did you know that you wanted to take that career and maybe start going into business for yourself to some extent?
Probably about the 7th or 8th time I got fired from someplace else. I realized I had to be self-employed. It was just a matter of necessity. And so I let's see. I opened. Well, I've had several businesses that didn't work, but the one that
I love that you admit that. I've had a failed business too, and please share that, because I think so many people hide their losses and don't share what they learned. And then when you take that L, that's when you really learn, right? So would you mind expanding upon that?
Yeah, sure. I would have to go to the Secretary of State's page to see how many I've had that didn't work.
Right.
But I remember one in particular that I tried. I worked at pretty hard from the late 90s, only for a couple of years before I realized it was just never going to work. Was a publishing company that I had started that while I was still in college. And the intention was for that to provide income for me while I was in vet school, which, as we now know, didn't happen. So that didn't work either. And then shortly after that is when I got more into professional safety, and I worked for a handful of places. I was a corporate safety director for a large commercial construction company. That didn't work out because I butted heads with some other decision makers, and you know, I have confidence in my decisions and in my styles, and if somebody else sees something completely differently than me, I'm going to have the discussion with them, and you know, sometimes it isn't received very favorably. So
What's important to know yourself, right? I remember early in my career, my dad kind of sat me down and explained that he saw me as a maverick of sorts that might do better, you know, with my own ship than working for, at that time I was considering the federal government. So it's neat that you realize that about yourself. You know, you kind of jokingly say, you know, about the 7th or 8th time you got fired, but did it seem like it took you a while to realize you were better as a risk-taking boss of your own thing, or did it take a while? I mean, were those times spread out, you know, across a bunch of years, or did it happen sooner than later?
I think the realization is often hazed by fear. And if you know, thinking about, okay, you have a secure job, you have a stable income, and you may have to bite your tongue a time or two, but you're going to be okay. You're going to pay your bills, or you can do what you really feel like, or being driven by your own principles, and possibly starve to death. You know, so I think that a lot of people, even though they feel like, yeah, I do belong in a self-employed situation, just aren't going to take the step because of that fear, especially if you have a family to support.
Of course.
And so I think probably a long time ago, I felt like maybe long before I actually was self-employed, I think I felt like I needed to be. I thought that's where I should, that's where I belong. But the Gulf Canyons Industrial Safety, which is my safety company, the first company that I've had that really did succeed, turns 14 years old next month in January.
Hey, congratulations on that birthday. That's an exciting anniversary.
Thank you. And you know, I don't spend a lot of time.
You're almost driving age as a company. You're getting there.
It's almost what?
You're almost driving age, right?
Almost, right? Yeah.
But that's exciting because, you know, I don't remember the stats, but it's something like 80% of businesses fail in year one. And of the 20% that are left, 80 to 90% of those businesses fail within 5 years. It is really, really hard to get a small business to succeed and to succeed decades. That's quite an achievement.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, same congratulations to you. You know, you built a very successful practice here. You're very well known. I was here a very short period of time before I knew who you were, and so
thank God you didn't need me. But no, thank you. But I'm blessed with such a great team. My parents are so good to me, raising me the right way. Any faults I have are my own, but I'm now blessed with 4 great attorneys that work for me, another 8 to 10 people that do a great job in support roles, and they you know, I can't say they make me look good, because look at me, there's no doing that. But they make our business look good, and I appreciate that. Let me ask you an advice type question for somebody who may be at the crossroads. You described yourself, sitting at a job, having a lot of fear about what would happen if they left that job, but knowing in their gut that their best life is lived as a boss, as a self-employed person, as a risk taker who's going to roll those entrepreneurial dice. What advice would you give to a person like that who's in a situation like you were all those years ago, 15 or plus years ago?
I am not a gambler, literally a gambler. I don't go to casinos. I don't see the appeal. The odds are against me. I know that. So it's going to sound strange when I say this, but I think the best advice I would have is to make sure that you can lose what you stand to lose if things don't work out. Don't.
That's excellent.
There's always going to be the risk of failure. It's always going to be there. You could have the best idea in the world.
Yeah.
You could be the best at what you do and still not succeed. And, it's a shame, but that's just a lot of that comes down to marketing. And, I do believe that we are very good at what we do. I'm terrible at marketing. I am horrible.
I don't know if I believe that. You talk your sales team talked me into buying that ad. So yeah, you might be a little more humble than accurate on that one. Well, let's talk about that. So there's marketing, there's operations, there's finance. As you venture into self-employment, which means business owner, you go from perhaps a very technical role where you're great at your thing, safety services, training, whatever it is. So now you've got to do that plus make payroll, buy insurance, do HR, yada, 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 you name it. What are some things in the business world that came easy to you and were quick lessons to learn? And which ones were a little tougher where you really had to, apply yourself to just make a basic level work?
Well, the things that came naturally to me were the actual technical work for, whatever I've done, because I would never go into business doing something I didn't think I could do quite well. Another thing that came naturally to me was putting in the long hours, because, as a small business owner, you don't have a 9-to-5 schedule, especially now with the newspaper added on. It is 7 days a week, no exceptions. And, a lot of my days don't end at 8, 9 o'clock. I left the office last night at, it was almost 9:30. And, that's just how it is. So, but that part came naturally and easily to me because, long hours I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
What was more of a challenge was the organization part. I'm not that good of an organizer. I never have been. But fortunately, I've been able to have staff who are very well organized. Our production manager, Amanda, fantastic. She's extremely organized. She keeps me organized. I mean, she'll go into my office and just, do whatever she wants. And, it's always better after she's been there.
Right.
Those types of things. Financial management. I've never been that good at that. I really haven't been. QuickBooks, I'm happy to just let her handle QuickBooks because that's the kind of thing that she's really good at. And I think that is probably one of the most important things that anybody can do when you can have a staff. Make sure that you hire people who are really good in the department that you put them in. I'm a firm believer in specialists and experts in everything that needs to be done. Nobody can, you don't want to have a jack of all trades in the office.
Because then they're a master of none. That's spot on. And I've seen that in my practice. Early in my career, I was a bit of like most lawyers. Lawyers have not figured this out the way the doctors have, right? In the medical world, a cardiologist is not looking at, a knee injury on the weekends and trying to do everything. They pick a specialty, they master it, and they lock in. Lawyers have been slow to do that. I think I'm still the only law firm that does just car, truck wreck, accident stuff. And I'm writing my latest book on these big truck accidents. And it's just the more I learn about something as a specialist or a subspecialist, the more I realize how little I did for my clients when I was a generalist, right? There's just nobody can master it all, right? And so I love your approach in finding specialists and putting them in the right spot. Because the other side of the coin is if there's something you're not good at, and I appreciate your candor in admitting things you weren't good at, but those are things that some people love to do. I don't like QuickBooks or accounting either, right? Thankfully, two of my best friends, Will and Angelique Richardson, have done that for me over the years, and they love it. They studied business at Tulane. It gets their juices flowing in a way it wouldn't for me. It sounds like you've kind of mastered that approach to putting the right people in the right spots and letting them do their thing. Where did you learn that? I mean, did you have a mentor? Was it a book? I mean, was there a system? How did you arrive at that outcome? Because it's clearly working for you, but I'd love to hear kind of where it started as a philosophy for you.
I don't really know if I could put my finger on any particular instance. I know that I like pie forks to eat pie, and I like specialty things, and so that applies to people too. And in our office, we have my son Riley graduated in marketing from LSU last May in 2022.
Hey, congratulations!
Yeah. He's a great kid. I call him a kid. He's 24, but he took over our marketing after when he graduated. He wanted to work in the music business, and so at the same time he was looking for work in the business end of the music field. I was looking for somebody to handle our marketing. And after a while, he realized that in order to work in that business, he would have to relocate. He'd have to go to Nashville or someplace. And so I just proposed it to him. I said, hey, would you be interested in being our marketing manager? And he said, yeah. And that actually surprised me. But I'm glad he did, because he took our marketing to a whole different level. I grew up with brick and mortar thoughts, mindsets. And when you think if you have a business, you have to have a location, you can draw people into your location. Now, we know now that that's not true, but for people who didn't grow up with that mindset, they're not encumbered by that mindset. And so we need to marry the past with the future. And I don't mean just in my businesses, all businesses. We've got to bring the past and the values of the past together with the way that things are moving in the future.
Right.
So it was great to have him on board. You mentioned Mary earlier when we were talking, our design coordinator.
Mary Haley, formerly Mary Duvick, one of everybody who knows her favorite people. She's a superstar.
Wonderful. We love Mary. She's the best. Her brother Andy is a good friend of mine. And
mine too. I grew up with Andy. He's something.
Oh, did you?
He's been at my house this week. He put in some beautiful hardwood floors, not just here at the office, but at our house. Anybody out there that has any need for hardwood floors, Andy is an artist. He's a true craftsman.
Yeah, he did my Brazilian cherry.
I've known him my whole life. We shot basketball in the backyard. He came when my kid got baptized. He came and brought him a gift. He's as good as they come.
He sure is. Yeah, you're right. And he did my Brazilian cherry floors in my house, and they look so good. But
if
Andy,
you don't mind, I'm sorry, Bobby. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I wanted to share a few comments, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We've got some good ones coming in here. Speaking of old friends from childhood, Sharon Miller, just one of the most beautiful people in Ponchatoula, inside and out. She says you guys rock. She loves the advice and focus on how failure and fear are overcoming ourselves in businesses and relationships and life. And Bobby, she thanks you for the insight. Sharon, thank you for tuning in. And that's a really neat comment. I appreciate you sharing it. Kathy Marie says, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say Sharon's a wonderful, wonderful person.
Yeah.
I know Sharon. She's a friend.
She's great.
Yes.
I think of her, cheerleading in high school, and she's always just had the best smile and the best outlook. Kathy Marie says, go Bobby. Hello, Kathy Marie. You've got a beautiful Facebook profile photo there. It's a great looking family there with a beautiful baby. And of course, everybody knows our clerk of court. He's been on the show before, Gary Stanga. Got to see him at the courthouse yesterday when my brother Bree qualified for re-election. And we were joking because Gary was Bree's Biddy basketball coach many, many years ago.
I'll be talking to Gary tomorrow, right before they close.
Oh, neat.
Need to get all the results.
Well, Gary does a great job. I'm so glad he got reelected. He certainly deserves it. And he says he loves the new look and he wishes you all the best. Gary, while you mentioned that, I'll go ahead and show this. The new look of the Ponchatoula Times. It is now the Tangi Times. And I hope you can see that there. Wow. Kim Mulkey, what a get. That's just wonderful. Don't pay any attention to this guy up here with the radio face. We'll cover him up. But if you would, Bobby, tell us about that transition. You know, the Ponchatoula Times has now expanded to the Tangi Times. I see you've got a big, robust team of reporters. You mentioned your son doing marketing. Tell us about all the great things that are going on at the newspaper.
So when Melissa Geldner had bought the paper from Brian McMahon, the original owner, in April of 2023, she had a ton of ideas. She wanted to do so much with it. And I mean, she really, I wish she were still with us, because I mean, she had some wonderfully creative ideas. Well, she worked on the paper for 3 months. And in that 3-month period, I had offered to help her with some editing, which I did. And one day in July, she texted me, it was a Friday night, I think, and said, hey, you want to buy the paper? And I thought she was kidding or drinking or something. I probably was. And so I texted back and said, you just bought it, LOL. And she said, what's your point? I forgot about it. Next morning, I woke up to this big, long text, like this long, explaining, no, I was totally serious, and here's why. And she gave me a bunch of reasons, and I said, okay, let's talk. So one of the first thoughts that I had when we started these talks was, it needs to expand. It needs to go all over Tangipahoa Parish. Tangipahoa has a lot to offer. There's a lot of information in the parish, and there's almost no coverage of it. So I wanted to change the name of the paper from the Ponchatoula Times to the Tangi Times to reflect that expansion, to represent that expansion better. But I didn't want to do it immediately because I thought that, you know, and I'm guilty of this myself. If I see a change coming, I may be pessimistic. And I think a lot of the people who have been reading the Ponchatoula Times for 40 years would have pessimism about it. They would probably be a little bit skeptical about accepting the new name for fear that some other bad changes are coming with it. So I said, let's make some really good changes.
Well, you know, in defense of the local consumer, seeing some changes over the years at the Daily Star, which is of course owned in Paducah, Kentucky, or whatever. You may have been a victim of folks, you know, not liking what's happened in that before. And of course, this is apples and oranges to that. You live here for a decade, you know, you're invested in the community. But I understand where you're coming from. That I can see where that will cause you some trepidation.
Yeah, and so I wanted to make sure that nobody was afraid of the changes that are coming with this newspaper. So we made sure that we let them see what this paper is going to be about before we change the name. We have gotten tons of calls, emails, even postal mail, if you can believe that. And those are my favorite ones that come in praising what we've done with the paper, thanking us for what we're doing with the paper. And it made me realize how many people truly do love this publication. And so we've expanded our retail distribution all the way up to Amy. Now the plan, all right, so let me go back to the plan. The plan was for us to have Hammond pretty well covered by the end of December and have good retail distribution in Hammond. We had that achieved by mid-October. And
wow, how'd you get that done so quickly? That's impressive.
You know, I'll tell you, one of the biggest assets we have is a really good friend of mine. His name's Tommy Hazelwood. He runs a video broadcasting company called Alfab 17. They share a lot of things to AN 17, and they are our video broadcast partner. They do a lot of video coverage of games and parades and things, and we post them on the Facebook page and on our website. And Tommy has just, out of the kindness of his heart, offered to drop off papers at, you know, wherever retailers, and he's gotten all these retail locations in Tickfall, Independence, Laranger, I mean, all over the place, who not only are carrying the paper but look for it and love it, and those are the ones that get picked up. I mean, we're replacing them sometimes midweek. People up there really like it. And so I think those are the people who are really going to appreciate the name change. And I think that the people in Ponchatoula, I don't want them to feel like they're losing the name because Ponchatoula is my home, and it always will be, as far as I'm concerned. Our office is in Ponchatoula, and so I think that I'll quote William Shakespeare, I guess. What's in a name? It's just
Yeah.
a name, but it does symbolize our coverage.
Well, it is tough as a transition to stomach for somebody who's used to getting all of the paper, right? I mean, we've had all the focus, but I think if people look at this critically, they'll understand the reality we're in, and the current status of print media economically. So this came up today at Rotary. You met one of my producers off camera, Jude Papillon, who's the former editor-in-chief of the Tulane Hullabaloo. So like you, he's a newspaper guy who's been there, done that. And he was our speaker. But we talked about the transition in the paper. People ask me, they know I'm an advertiser in your paper. And so, like, what's up? And I said, look, we've got to support this venture. We basically have two newspapers in our local community. One's owned by out-of-state interests. And now we have a second. I said, economically, I just don't see the business support there to sustain the type of robust newspaper you've put together with multiple reporters and professionals on the marketing and sales side. And, it's just, in fairness to you and the venture, if Ponchatoula businesses cannot and will not step up to, advertise like like you might need to stay in business, you've got to open it up to a broader. And look, we want, the news. I want to know what's happening in Independence, where my in-laws live. I want to know what's happening in Hammond, where I have lunch 3 days a week and where we go to the movie theater. The community is just bigger than Ponchatoula. And so, like we looked at it today and I said, look, not everybody in the seen and heard part, or I forget what you call it, but, not everybody in there was from Ponchatoula, but several people were. We're represented. We're there. So I think you'll find people supportive, but, it will take some getting used to, but I really like what you're doing. And I think it's necessary to stay in business and grow it back like you are doing, which is really exciting to see.
Thank you very much, Parker. I really appreciate that. We're always open to suggestions. Anytime anybody has a comment, positive or negative, or just constructive, or even less than constructive, we want to hear them all, and we'll respond. We want, the only way that people are going to read the paper is if they like it, and we want them to love it. And the best way for us to get them to love it is to make sure it's got what they want.
Yeah. Well, it's a great paper. It's got a legacy. Brian McMahon came in here 40 plus years ago, and he was a real deal journalist from the mean streets of Detroit, Michigan. And, he'd worked at one of the biggest newspapers in the world there. And I mean, he built something special. It won awards for journalism and did great. Brian aged and had some health issues. And sadly, the paper kind of contracted there toward the end. And Mary did a phenomenal job keeping the thing alive on life support. And Brian did everything he could. But it's neat to see you breathe new life into it, because those of us, and I grew up a dear friend of the McMahons. Their son, Brendan, who was also the editor of the paper for a few years, was a dear friend of mine. We went to St. Joseph together. We lived a block apart. We stayed at each other's house. I swam in their pool. And it's really neat to me to see this thing stay alive, because I've seen other newspapers, including the Enterprise here in Ponchatoula, but also the newspaper in Amite, Kentwood, you name it, fall by the wayside. So thank you for all you're doing. Local news is important, and we need it, and we need it to be done well. And you're doing that. Why don't you talk to us about specifically things you're doing at the paper? You do news, you do sports, a lot of the typical things we've seen before, but you also have some fun new takes on things. Tell us about how you approach it and what your content is and will be.
Well, we want to appeal to a broad range of interests. Different people with different personalities like different things. So we want everything to be local. You're not going to open up the Tangi Times and find an article that we poached from the AP, from the Associated Press. That's just not going to happen. And we write everything in-house. Our staff journalist, her name's Stephanie Hedge, wonderful girl. She's here local.
She does really well. I liked her write up on the art Twin Steeples this week.
Yeah.
She's excellent.
Yeah, in fact, she mentioned you. She said, "I know he's not going to remember me, but she said I used to work at North Oaks, and not North Oaks, North Cypress."
Yeah. No, I remember she worked
said,
at the front desk, and I think we've got some family friends in common.
"Oh,
I think
okay.
her brother and my
Hey, Stephanie, if you're
yeah.
watching, you were wrong. He does remember you."
Yeah, no, I do. I remember her well. She's a really nice person, and kind of have an artsy. I hope this isn't politically incorrect, but like an artsy hippie chick vibe that I dig because my parents were hippies who had a Volkswagen van and did all that back. And my dad went to Berkeley in the '60s, so.
Really?
I hope that doesn't offend you, but I like your vibe. I remember you well. And I really like your work. You're a talented journalist, and Bobby's lucky to have you.
She really is.
Tell us more about what y'all are doing, Bobby.
Yeah. So no, you're right about. In fact, her alter ego is called Free Range Hippie. She sells her her artwork under Free Range Hippie.
Cool.
But she said that you were the nicest member at North Cypress. So.
Oh, well, that's nice of her to say. Definitely wasn't the fittest, as you can see. But no, so what I remember about her is maybe she had like pink or blue hair before that was kind of she's on the cutting edge of that stuff. I don't know what her hair looks like now, but yeah.
Both colors
I like her vibe. So she's doing great work and writing, articles. She had, I think, the one about the dollar store last week or the week before. So real news stuff like that, that's kind of important to communities where people are like, hey, is this going to become a traffic issue, a safety issue, et cetera, to the more artsy side of life, which, falls in line with her interests. So she's doing great as a journalist. Ethan Pelche, we talked about offline. I grew up with his dad, went to school with his dad, served with him in the Key Club, been a dear friend forever. He's doing gangbusters on your sports work. Tell us about the rest of your tribe of professionals out there.
So we have a good sports section now. We call it the Sports Lounge, and that name was born out of the idea of the assistant sports editor. His name's Floyd Pitcher. He goes by Flo. And he said, I want this sports section to feel like just guys hanging around in a bar talking about sports while they're drinking. And so we decided to call it the Sports Lounge. So we have.
Well, we got to watch out. Ethan's underage.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. He better be on root beer while Flo and C-Dub and the boys are If you don't mind, I want to share a quick comment from another great man who knows his sports and has been a guest on the show like you, my dear friend Marshall Graves. He's given a shout out to Ethan Pelche. Ethan, of course, has a very important role with the state champion basketball team, where Marshall's son is the MVP and star player. So, Marshall, thanks for tuning in. But that's neat. I love to see Ethan get some praise because he's just such a great kid from a fantastic family that served our community in a variety of ways. So the Sports Lounge, that sounds fun. That's different and new, and I'm digging it, man. So far, so good.
It is. It always starts off with just some outlandish comments from C-Dub, Chris Wright. He's the sports editor. Always writes some wacky kind of, what we call dubious news, and it's exactly that. Then we have contributions for all of SLU sports. Ethan, you just mentioned. Ethan Pelche writes the Ponchatoula High School Sports Digest. It used to just be football, but now he includes, especially with the change of seasons right now, he's got girls basketball, volleyball, softball, whatever's going on, he's going to write about for Ponchatoula High. We have somebody who covers all of SLU. We've got somebody who sends in Tulane sports news. He's Tulane alum like you. He's proud of it, and always likes writing about it. We're even open to more sports contributors because the sports page, as far as I'm concerned, could be 10 pages all by itself. People want to.
And in the good old days, local news did that. Look, I'm going to tell you, I'm 46 years old, and I was no kind of athlete. When I was introduced to speak to the Kiwanis Club the first time, the member there, my childhood coach, Mutt Burner, pointed out that my athletic career peaked in the 5th or 6th grade. But I got to tell you, one of my prized possessions in life is a little news clipping of the time I got a bunch of hits in a Little League game, right? So in the good old days, it went down to that granular level where Ponchatoula youth baseball, basketball, etc., was covered. I don't know that we could ever get back to that in 2023, but I love to hear you expanding on that, because sports is something that a lot of us are interested in, and there's just no way to get that information if local news doesn't cover it.
Yeah, and we'll cover it all. We'll cover high school, junior high. I've even reached out to St. Joseph's and some other schools and said, hey, look, if y'all have any teams that win championships, you've got clubs that win some kind of award, please tell us. We want to cover everything that we can cover about, all the schools in the area. People like, I find that kids really like to see themselves in the newspaper. Social media, they can care less. They can put themselves in social media. I was in Delicious Donuts one day, and a lady was in front of me with a young girl, and they were buying 2.5 dozen donuts. And I said, oh, y'all are about to make somebody happy. And she said, oh, well, it's her birthday, so we're bringing them for her class. I said, oh, it's her birthday. We need to put her in the newspaper. And I handed her my card, and she said, oh, you're serious? I said, yeah. And I said, call me and, tell me her birthday. We'll put her in the paper. And she called me about 20 minutes later and said, oh my God, she was so excited. She jumped out of the car and told everybody, I'm going to be in the newspaper. And, so
it's true. And Marshall's comment here is proof of that. He says those clips from the old newspapers are what we waited on. And it's so true. You'd have a little kid running down to buy the Ponchatoula Times or the Enterprise to see if he'd be in there. And that's really neat. One of the things we do through our Bikes for Kids program is we put every kid in there. At the end this year, we gave away 50 bikes during the summer. And we bought the back page of your newspaper so that every kid could be in there, and then we would go acquire extra copies and send them to their mamas. But it's always very well received. I mean, you're spot on. Little kids love to see themselves in the newspaper. They can post their own Instagram, but they cannot, get themselves in the paper without somebody like you sharing your munificence, if you will. So what else can we expect from the paper in the days to come?
Well, you mentioned that Stephanie covers now not just community, but also news, real news, politics and business. And she really has become very diverse with that. We're going to add some more news coverage for one thing, because we don't have anybody who can attend every meeting yet, but we're going to add that. We're going to start covering more things in the north end of the parish. We are going to try to spend a little bit more time Hammond and North, in addition to what we're doing here in Ponchatoula, because most of our coverage still is in Ponchatoula. And it's always going to be there. Like I said, Ponchatoula is our home. We just want to add on to it. And I think that probably I know one of the things that we have been working on is a new section about music news.
Oh yeah,
classic cars. I'm a huge classic car fan, and we've already expanded our what we call IQ, our intelligence corner section, which is the puzzles and brain exercises and things like that. All that is being expanded.
Well, can I make a plug for a music article here?
Please.
You've got to cover the Cricket Farmers. This is a band with Brandon Perrin and his cousin Lucas Watkins. It's an amazing duo. Brandon's birthday is coming up here. My buddies and I, we camp out behind Brandon's mom's house for his birthday every year. We've been doing that for 30 plus years. But I can make an introduction if you're interested. They played a lot of events, Twin Steeples and whatnot. But there's a lot of good musicians around here. But please consider covering the Cricket Farmers. I think that would be cool.
The Cricket Farmers, okay.
Cricket Farmers, Brandon Perrin, Lucas Watkins. Brandon is my older boy's godfather, and just a heck of a guy. We were classmates from kindergarten through 12th grade. Lives here in town. But I gotta put a plug in for him.
I'm gonna pass this action item on to my son right now. Riley Perez, you heard that?
Yeah,
All right.
cool.
Get in touch with the cricket farmers.
Well, this all sounds amazing. We're so excited. And I know I could keep you here forever because you're clearly doing many great things and have many more great plans. Um, what I want to ask before, because I promised you I'd respect your time and get you out of here fairly soon, and I've probably already gone over that. If I could, I asked you a similar question earlier about business, but if you knew somebody who wanted to get into new media, whether it's newspaper, other stuff you talked about, video, online, etc., what advice would you give them? Because I'm sure, it's something. I mean, you mentioned earlier the fear and leaving any job to start something new. I'm sure there's a little extra fear in jumping into news when you see other papers going down in flames. You seem to be swimming against the tide, yet succeeding. So, to young folks like my producer Jude, who you met, who was a college newspaper editor, what would you tell them and how to succeed like you have in this industry?
Well, I would say, first of all, make sure you do it extremely well, because people notice when it's done well. People notice when it's done poorly. Your credibility is going to lie wholly in the quality of your work. You've got to have good content. You've got to have good editing. You've got to have interesting content. You can fill up a newspaper with a bunch of drivel, that nobody cares about, and nobody's going to read it. Yeah. You give a 30, 40, 50-page paper of something that nobody reads. Right. So, make sure you're really good at what you're doing. The only reason that I'm a good editor is because I've been a technical writer for so many years. I've been a technical writer for, 30 years. And I have always, now I'll tell you, Jesuit's going to beat the good writer into you. All right, you are not going to leave Jesuit without being a good writer. So I did have a good foundation when it came to that. But I cringe if I go to a restaurant and see a misspelled word on a menu. I just that kind of stuff bothers me. Maybe it doesn't bother other people as much, but I think people who care.
Well, some people, a certain type. Look, as the former editor in chief of the Louisiana Law Review, and that's 20 plus years in my rear view. But same thing. I mean, you see things that others don't, and it's hard to stomach sometimes for those of us that have written and edited. So that's neat. One other question I wanted to ask you? You seem to really love what you do. Am I right about that? And if so, why? Speak to that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do love it. And I've loved everything that I've done. But I really do love this newspaper business. I really do. And it's fortunate for me that our production manager, Amanda Long, is so good now with our clients in Gulf Canyon's industrial safety. She does the majority of the work that our clients require. My time is so limited now with the newspaper that I can't do too much of the technical writing that I used to do, that I spent so much time doing before we had the newspaper. But thank goodness that coordinated with her skills, the increase in her skills. But I do love this. If I didn't absolutely adore working on this newspaper, I wouldn't be putting in the hours that I'm putting in. And but I do. I relish every moment of it.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. We're lucky to have you. There's a reason why the first guest I ever had when I started the podcast that was a precursor to this Facebook show, the first guest I ever had was Brian McMahon. And it's because of the respect I had for the work he did as the editor, publisher of your paper. It's a very important asset in our community. As we've seen other communities lose their paper, it's become all the more obvious how important it is to keep it alive. So thank you for doing it. You're doing, really important work, and it's probably harder now than ever. But know that there are many of us that you may never hear from that appreciate it, and we're enjoying it, and we're looking forward to getting your paper every week, and we can't wait to get the next one. And it's exciting to hear you talk about websites and social media, because we can look for stuff there too. So, before we shut down, why don't you tell us how we can find the paper, how we can get it, how we can subscribe, maybe walk through the website, wherever you want us to go. But for people watching that want to get involved and purchase from you, how can they do it?
Well, we have our website is tangitimes.com. You can go to that website and there's a subscribe button at the top right. We just launched that website about a week ago, this new interactive website. And I haven't even seen it myself yet.
Yeah, no, we just pulled it up. Look, we were talking about Stephanie. I see one of her columns there.
Yeah.
And that's that Dollar General column that I remembered. And what I'll ask my producers, if they're listening, to also put a link to the page in the comments. And so yeah, that's neat. And I know if you hit a button there, it'll show you how to subscribe, how to contact. Yeah, so that's a great resource. Is there a telephone number people who would prefer to call, or do you
Sure.
stay away from telephone?
Yep, of course, 985-467-0096. I'll say that again in just a second. But the subscription price is $50. But for now,
That's for a whole year, right?
For a whole year, yeah, that's 52 issues mailed, so that includes postage. But right now, we're keeping the old price of $35 effective through December 31st. So
Absolutely.
anybody,
we got an
$35.
incentive there, guys, to renew your subscription. We've only got a few weeks left there. And my producers are kind enough to include that phone number here. So I'll put it up again, 985-467-0096. Bobby, before we let you go, if there's anything else on your mind, on your heart, anything at all you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers, please do it at this time.
I've always been a huge proponent of shopping, not just small and not just local, but locally owned. I was having this discussion with my friend Tommy Hazelwood the other night. He said, there's a difference between shop local and shop locally owned. And I totally agree. We can go into any local store. You don't really know who you're supporting. But if you shop at places that are owned by your neighbors, you are making a big difference in your own local economy, in your community. Parker, I know you do a lot of wonderful things for the community. We try to do it as well. By somebody coming here and supporting your business or my business, they're supporting everybody we support.
Well, the money stays in the community. And so my little firm's able to buy bikes for kids. We sponsor the little basketball team that I coach. If you send those dollars off to somebody in Baton Rouge or Paducah, Kentucky, or wherever, they're going to stay there and benefit that community. We've got one more comment here. Came in at the end of the wire here. Our dear friend Wesley Daniels says, "Congrats, Bobby. Everything looks great. You have a great staff. And like me, he loves Mary." And I want to give Wesley a shout out. We showed that gruesome guy up top here earlier, but if you flip the paper down, you get the much more handsome face of my old St. Joe classmate and buddy. So check it out, guys. And it is great. I love what Bobby's saying about shopping local, because it doesn't matter whether you're talking about getting your car fixed at Graves Automotive, getting your lawyer here in my shop, your paper at Bobby's. It's just really important to shop local when you can. And the great thing about Ponchatoula is we're pretty good about that most of the time. We really are. It's been neat to see this community support businesses that put themselves out there. Whether it's a strawberry farmer or a seafood salesman or whatever. Or an artist. I think about Mandy May Poche when she came on the show and kind of took a big risk. And man, she and her husband Josh are kicking butt on Main Street. So it's a great place to go into business. And thank you for mentioning that. To our viewers, I say thank you for sticking in with us to our end, till the end. To Bobby, thank you for sharing your valuable time. And I look forward to talking to you many more times in the days to come. So y'all have a good week. We're going to take a few weeks off for Christmas break, and we'll see you back here in January for Ponchatoula Live. Take care.